Thank you, Chair. No apologies have been reported to me on this occasion.
Thank you. Item 1, declarations of interest. Can I invite members to declare any interests? No. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting, pages 4 to 18. Can I refer members to pages 4 to 18 of the agenda, which comprise the minutes of our last meeting as held on the 9th of November 2021. Are the minutes agreed? Thank you. Item 3, urgent business, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. No items of business of urgency to deal with today, so I'm pleased to advise the Chair we can move on to our first item of business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Item 4, Century Buildings, 31 North John Street, Liverpool 2. We've got no speakers for or against. Could I ask Fergal McAvoy to take us through this application and summarise the application, and then I'll invite members to ask questions and comments. Thank you, Ferg.
Thanks, Chair. Fergal McAvoy, Team Leader for City Centre Development Management Purposes. Mike, can you just go to the image? I think it's about the third image on that just shows a photo of the, yeah, if you just keep it at that, thanks very much. The application in front of you today relates to a 6-storey building located at the corner of Victoria Street and North John Street. The application is formally offices on the upper floors and got a number of commercial uses, as you can see on the ground floor at the moment. The proposal is for the conversion of the upper floors from the first floor to the 5th floor into 14 one-bed apartments and 8 two-bed serviced apartments with operate as an apart hotel within Class C1 of the Town and Country Planning Uses Class Order. This application, members may, if they've got that long a memory, was previously with you back in October 19 when you resolved to grant planning permission for this use. The applicant has now got into a position where they're ready to sign the Section 106 agreement, but because there have been changes to national and local planning policies in the interim period, we thought it's only right that you bring the application back in front of you today. There's been no external alterations or internal alterations are proposed to the building since it was last with you. There's a full detailed report where all the issues are addressed. The only probably change in legislation in the interim period relates to inclusive design, but the scheme in terms of provision of bedrooms for wheelchair disabled and ambulant disabled, it meets all the policy requirements, Chair, and the applicant is paying a full Section 106. So it said 14 one-bed apartments and 8 two-bed apartments. But there's no real issues with this application, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. Do members have any questions? Councillor Prince?
Just the two things are spotted on this. One was the complete lack of car parking facilities. So if you have a car, you can't live there, basically. And the other one was only one of the 22 apartments was actually wheelchair accessible. So realistically, once that one place is filled, if you're disabled, you can't live there either.
Okay, Chair, thanks, Councillor Prince. It's serviced apartments, not for permanent residents, but for weekend, like an Airbnb operation.
Okay. In that case, you can't stay there then.
You can't stay there permanently. You've got to use public transport or other forms of transportation. And the level of provision for fully accessible rooms is slightly different. For permanent places, residents, it's 10% provision. For hotels, it's 5% wheelchair provision and 5% for ambulant disabled, with 15% of the rooms capable of further adoption at a later stage, and it meets all those requirements, Councillor Prince.
What I'm basically saying is, wouldn't it make sense if the ones which are capable of being transformed into being accessible are actually done at the start?
Yeah, it may be sensible, but they're actually the policy requirements. So if you can bring a horse to water effectively, but if he doesn't have to drink, so Okay.
Are there any more questions? No? Okay, I mean, this is the same application that was considered by the planning committee in October 2019. And it's only here because of the time that has elapsed since the original report was written. And it just needs to be reconsidered by the committee. Really, there's no changes to the original scheme. So I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I do have to take individual votes from members. So, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Cardwell. 4. Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mannett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
4.
And Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you. That, I believe, concludes voting of those members present and eligible to vote for this item. Note Councillors Thompson and Key have joined proceedings. They're welcome to proceedings again, but again, as they're not present throughout the item, they will not able to vote. Of those members, however eligible, the item is carried and approved, and will now revert to the Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Item 5, which is Gladstone House, 11 Union Court, Liverpool 2. Again, there are no speakers for or against. And again, can I ask Fergal to take us through this application, and then we can ask members to ask questions or comments afterwards. Thank you.
Chair, it's actually my colleague, sat beside me, Felicity Collins, who will present this application.
Thanks, Fergal. Thanks, Chair. Felicity Collins, Planning Officer for this application, so I'll just take you through it. This is an application for Gladstone House, which is at number 11 Union Court off Cook Street, which you can see in the photographs here. It's not a listed building, but it adjoins the Grade 2 listed building at 9 and 9A Union Court, which is to the left-hand side on the photo and is within the Castle Street Conservation Area. If we can just go to the next slide, you'll see a site plan. The proposal is to convert a 3-storey office building and add a single-storey rooftop extension to create a total of 22 apartments, of which 14 would be C3 residential and 8 would be C1 serviced apartments. Members may recall that this application came before the committee in April this year, where it was resolved to grant planning permission subject to section 106 and a full list of conditions. As with the scheme preceding this one, the legal agreement's now ready for signing, but because of the lapse of time, we're returning the application before you, having reviewed it in light of the current policy context, in particular the advanced stage of the local plan. You've got my full update report in front of you, as well as the original committee report, so I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but I'll just run through briefly the scheme and the update. So the proposal hasn't changed at all since the application was considered in April, and the applicants agreed to pay the full section 106 contributions in relation to the standard requirements for open space, street trees, the city centre model, art strategy and monitoring. Just running through the scheme, it's a former office building within the main office area of the city centre, but an area where conversion to other complementary city centre uses isn't unusual and is compliant with the strategic investment framework and NPPF. The building has been vacant for over 2 years and was marketed for new office uses prior to this application coming forward without any success. So that meets the local plan policy requirement in relation to conversion of office uses in the main office area. The proposal involves internal alterations to create the apartments with very, very limited alterations to the facade. At the roof level, you can see on the elevation in front of you, a new floor of accommodations proposed of a fairly contemporary design, which is contrasting but fairly respectful at the height that it is to the existing building. There's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments proposed and 1 wheelchair accessible apartment on the ground floor, which meets the policy requirements for inclusive design. At the basement level, there's provision for a cycle store, refuse store, management offices. On to the next slide, please, Mike. I think that's the ground floor plan, just gives you a feel for the size of the building and the layout of apartments, with the service apartments being on the sort of inner more landlocked part of the building. So the policies of the local plan were considered as material in the original assessment of the application, but nevertheless we've reviewed that in the context of the local plan policies now all holding very significant weight. Given the context of the size of the property and its location and the challenges of refurbishment of an existing building, officers are satisfied that the scheme is acceptable, particularly when we balance that against the benefits that the scheme offers of refurbishment and reuse of an existing building, which has been demonstrated to be vacant without prospect of a future office use. As such, we're still recommending approval subject to the Section 106 and full list of conditions. The conditions were amended at the previous committee to require operational management plan, and that condition's included within the current recommendation. So the applicant and agent aren't present today, but if there's any questions, we have to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Felicity. Do members have any questions? Councillor Print.
I've let these agendas through. On this one, the issue is on page 57 of the agenda. They're supposed to have, I know it's again a small number of affordable units of accommodation, but they're basically just saying we can't afford to have any. So that's the end of the story on them. I know affordable doesn't mean a great deal, it all depends on the value of the housing stock nearby, and they wouldn't be affordable for me personally, for example, anyway. But to just get out of it by saying we can't afford it, is that right?
Yeah, it's a fair question, and I think that's a point that the applicant has made in terms of introducing a requirement for affordable housing at this kind of later stage in a development project. So you're right, it isn't necessarily a reason to dismiss the requirement for affordable housing. From the planning department's point of view, we have the local plan policy for affordable housing now within the local plan and now holding very significant weight. So the policy is in place, but what we're still working on is the mechanism for actually delivering that policy and securing affordable housing units using that policy. So we're still working through that. What we understand for the city centre particularly is that registered providers of social housing would find it particularly difficult to take. In this case, it would be 3 units out of the 14. So the registered providers would find that particularly difficult to deliver and manage 3 properties within an apartment building. So in this instance, we accept that it's not something that we would insist upon, but it isn't based on viability, that decision. Thank you.
Okay. Do members have any other questions or comments? No? Okay, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. If you can cast your vote, please.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mallett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you, and Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you. That concludes voting on the application. The application is approved unanimously, and we therefore move on to our next item of business. Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Item 6, the Gostins building, 32 to 36 Hanover Street, Liverpool 1. Again, we've got no speakers for or against. Can I ask the case officer to take us through this application, please?
Chair, thanks very much. I think everyone's familiar with the Gostins Hanover Street. This application has been in front of you on numerous occasions in the past 7 or 8 years. I'm just looking through the report now, and there's 7 separate consents being granted for a kind of conversion and reuse of the building for hotel accommodation, with a number of proposals for rooftop extensions. The most recent consent was back in resolution to grant planning permission in December of last year, where you were reminded to grant planning permission for conversion of a building to a 207-bedroom hotel, together with ground floor, bar and restaurant area, and the construction of a 2-story rooftop extension. Mike, if you go on to the next slide and the next one again. Yeah, you can see that in the right hand side, you can see the kind of two-story rooftop extension. Previously, we had granted as high as a 4-top rooftop extension in this location, so I think officers were quietly pleased that the new owners of the site were happy to go ahead with a scheme for a construction of a 2-story rooftop extension. It's a non-listed building, but it's within Duke's Street Conservation Area, and it's like a significant non-designated heritage asset. It's similar to the last application I presented. The applicant now wants to sign the Section 106 agreement, so there's a need to put this application back in front of you to consider matters afresh in relation to changes in national and local regional planning policy. There are no proposals since you last considered to change any external alterations or internal alterations to the building. There's been a number of objections received to the application the last time round in terms of relation and kind of fenestration details and a number of the elevations. The fact that Campbell Street at the rear of the building is too narrow for the servicing strategy for the building. The fact that there's significant number of apart hotels in around this location as well. And all those issues are teased out within the report. They were addressed at the last planning committee, but there's just referenced again for your information. So you've got a full report in front of you where the application is assessed in relation to principle of the development, design and external alterations, the impact on the historic environment, parking, servicing, highway strategy on adjacent residential occupiers, particularly towards the rear of the site, and also on Section 106 requirements. In this instance, the applicant is paying full Section 106 contribution. As I said, Chair, nothing has changed in relation to this application since December of last year. The support of your officers for this application still remains. Thank you.
Thanks, Fergal. Members have any questions? Councillor Prince again.
Well, no one else is saying anything. A couple of things. You've got a 200-plus bedroom hotel. Again, even though they're staying at one night or whatever, no car parking facilities. I mean, I wouldn't stay in a hotel with absolutely no car parking facilities. And any time I've gone on holiday in this country, I've always gone in the car. So that to me is an issue. But the second one actually gets highlighted on page 108 is the particular quality of the windows, which I think are being, some of them are being bricked up basically in this change. Is that necessary? Is there any way of keeping the particularly almost unique windows that it has at the moment? This is actually one of my favourite buildings. There used to be some great collector's shops in there, so I know it really well. It's just a shame it's going to change like this, but they can keep what they can keep on it. Really good.
Yeah, Councillor Prince, I think they're fair comments. Obviously, it's a city centre location. Our strategy is try to discourage as many visits to the city centre by private car. There's obviously multiple forms of kind of public transport solutions and other methods of transport. In relation to the window details, this is a sensitive conversion of a building, an iconic building in the city that's fallen into disrepair in the past number of years, and the operators who were in there over time, they've either relocated or gone out of business. We think this is a very sensitive conversion. A lot of the changes to fenestration details are largely to do with fire safety requirements. You'll notice from the elevations there's a requirement to all the windows on the front where they're the kind of prime window elevation, they're going to be upgraded with windows towards the rear of the building that aren't as visible as such from the public highway. They're the ones that are changing.
Are there any other questions from members? Councillor Lake?
Thanks, Chair. I suppose just a comment, really. It seems to me, and we've seen two examples this morning, that irrespective of the design and feature of some of the great buildings that we've got in the city, it always seems that the key to any extensions to the building always seems to be to plonk a box on top of the building. And it's either a black box or a grey box or a brown box. And you refer to this as being a sensitive development. And I appreciate that. And there's talk about the windows and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, the designers just stuck a box on top. And we see this right across the city. It doesn't matter what the facades or any of the other design features are. The key to any extension is just put a box on top.
Okay, I mean, I don't think that was a question. That's just a comment, really, isn't it? You know, I think what the case officer was trying to say, that this is a sensitive application and a sensitive conversion. You know, obviously, well, or a rooftop extension. It depends on how it's subjective, isn't it, really? I mean, this was considered at the last, well,
Chair,
that's your opinion.
Just add that obviously it's within Duke Street Conservation Area. The application is supported by Heritage Officer, equally so the Urban Design Officer. Historic England were also notified of the application and they didn't raise any concerns.
Okay, thanks for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Bennett?
It's just on page 110. There was a number of specific issues raised in relation to the approach to the building, the design of the counter heights within the ground floor stroke bar entrance, the toilets and accessible toilets, location and design of accessible bedrooms and bedrooms for ambulant disabled people. Are we getting any reassurance that, you know, these kind of things are going to be fixed or will be accessible?
So yes, like a lot of applications, there's a lot of lead in time from what is presented to us to when they get a hotel operator on board, when a lot of, we'll say, the more specific in terms of counter heights are agreed. There's a requirement that all 5% of the rooms will have to be fully wheelchair accessible, as in the last application, 5% for ambulant disabled. So there's a number of conditions put in place. So there will be further dialogue between our inclusive design officer, the planning officers, and the end operators to ensure that the principles of the application are adhered to.
Okay, thanks. I can't see any other members indicating they want to ask a question or a comment. I mean, this is the same application and nothing's changed since it was last considered in 2020. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Usual procedure, voting in sequence. So, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mannett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lake.
4.
And Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the voting on the application. The voting is unanimous of those members present, and the application is therefore approved. We now turn to our final item of business. Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Item 7, 1 Princess Road, Liverpool 8. And we do have the agent present who's going to give us a presentation on this application. Can I invite Vidal Jackson? Are they present?
Hi, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the application is to carry out alterations to the existing building in order to convert an existing 36-bed HMO into 9 cluster HMOs and 1 studio apartment. Having worked closely with the planner and the conservation on the application, I'm happy to present to you today the proposal with a recommendation of approval. Located at 1 Princess Road in Liverpool L8, the application site is within Canning Street Conservation Area, adjacent to Princess Park Road, and a heritage statement was submitted to accompany the application. The extent of works comprises of full refurbishment or replacement of the existing windows and doors, removal of the obsolete external fire escape, and single-storey roof extension, along with necessary landscaping works. The existing 36-bed HMO spans across all 4 storeys, where all residents share communal areas such as kitchens, bathrooms and lounges. As expected, this makes the management of the existing property very difficult, with 36 residents using all floors and shared. The application therefore proposes for 9 HMO clusters and 1 duplex apartment in order to reduce the number of residents sharing communal functions. The HMO use of this building is well established, as it has been operational for over 9 years and in hostel use prior to this for 13. As stated within the report, it is therefore considered that the proposed marginal increase in HMO accommodation would not have significant impact and is in principle acceptable. Next slide, please. When subdividing the existing building into the proposed cluster units, a lot of attention was given in order to retain the building's main architectural features, such as the main entrance, main staircase, and the fenestration. 4 bedroom and living spaces, along with the provision of bathrooms, as well as bin stores, cycle and parking, all meet with the policy requirements. The proposal offers improvement of the existing HMO by clustering bedrooms into groups of 3 to 7 bedroom units, each with internal front door, shared kitchen, dining, living spaces and bathrooms. This allows for better management and maintenance of the property. The side and rear garden is also proposed to be used for the residents for private external amenity space, which is well landscaped with planting and trees. The location of the application has good transport links to both city centre, North and South Liverpool, as well as the city centre being within walking distance. The proposal will also provide sufficient cycle storage to promote healthy ways consultants' recommendations. Next slide, please. Single-storey extension proposes a 4-bed flat with a design that is sympathetic in scale, form and mass to the existing building, with a proposed setback from the main facade, with the majority of the extension being well hidden behind the existing parapet wall. The materiality proposed is to be contrasting to the existing brick in order to not be pastiche, but with complementing colour palette. Next slide, please. The proposed extension is not detrimental to the building nor its surrounding residential neighbours, and is positively supported by the planning officer and all relevant consultees. In conclusion, the application presented proposes a 9-cluster unit and 1 duplex apartment to allow for better management and maintenance of the existing building, along with sympathetic single-storey rooftop extension. We've worked closely with the planner and conservation officer over the course of the application, which proposes for the extension of an existing building to extend its life and to provide high quality accommodation in a well suited location. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Could you just wait there a moment? Do members have any questions for Mr. Jackson? Councillor Cardwell and Councillor Pritt.
I walk past this building almost daily, and I've got a question about the windows. I see that we're now talking about refurbishing or replacing with like for like. I'm wondering if during that process the windows are going to be double glazed, and what effect that will have on, if you like, the carbon footprint of the building. Because as I walk past, while I like the old Victorian windows, I wouldn't want to be living on the other side of them. So I guess my question is, are we maintaining what's required as part of an important conservation area, but also thinking about how we reduce the heat travelling through the windows?
Okay, Mr. Jackson, could you respond to that?
Yes, so we worked very closely with the conservation officer in regards to what we was going to propose for the windows. So it'd be a like for like with a secondary glazing system behind. but this is something that we've asked to be conditioned, so for future discussion with the conservation officer.
Answer your question. Okay, thank you. Councillor Prince?
Thanks, Chair. You said you were going to remove the now surplus external fire escape. What have you done to increase the fire prevention measures inside the building to make that external escape unnecessary?
So at the moment, the external fire escape serves the full 4 floors as it's classed as 1 unit. As we are decreasing the amount of units, we'll have a internal protected 30-minute fire escape route, which is in line with the building regulations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, are there any further questions from members to Mr. Jackson? No? There are no speakers against this application. Can I ask Stuart, the case officer, to take us through this application, and members can then ask questions or make comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Stuart Clark here, Team Leader of the City South for Development Management. As you've heard, the premises is an existing 36-bed HIMO, which is located within the Canning Street Conservation Area. This proposal seeks to erect a small rooftop extension to the premises as part of the wider reconfiguration of the premises to subdivide the building into 9 separate smaller HMOs and to allow an additional 7 beds with a 1-person, 2-bed studio flat. In terms of the principle of the use, the premises already operates as a 36-bed HIMO, which is more difficult to manage due to the number of people using the same space. By subdividing the units into smaller HIMOs, this will allow better management of each unit through less people being in each cluster unit, which will give them more of a sense of ownership of that space and provide a more secure environment for each occupier. Each new created smaller unit will meet the spatial standards required in terms of bedroom sizes, kitchen and communal spaces and bathrooms, and there will be sufficient space for bin and cycle storage as part of a rear external communal area. The increase in number of occupants from 36 to 45 is considered to be acceptable given the existing lawful use, and it's considered that any noise and activity associated with the premises over and above that which already exists would not be significantly different. The proposed small rooftop extension will be set back from the main facade of the building using contrasting materials, and the extension is such that it's considered there will be no detrimental harm to the wider conservation area or the amenity of nearby occupiers. The building is a heritage asset and therefore it is necessary to work with the existing fabric of the building. Whilst there is level access to the rear of the premises, the internal configuration contains stepped access and changes in levels, which precludes the ability to provide full level access throughout. Given the existing layout and use, and in the interest of protecting the integrity and future of the heritage asset, this arrangement is considered to be acceptable in weighing in the planning balance. Head of Highways and Transportation has considered the application and raises no objections, and is satisfied that the level of car parking of 8 spaces and 16 cycle spaces will be satisfactory for the proposal, giving its use and highly accessible location to public transport links and goods and services. To conclude, therefore, the continued use of the premises as a HIMO with a reconfigured layout to facilitate smaller manageable units is considered to be acceptable and will improve the amenity of future occupiers. A small increase in numbers is not considered such that it would be detrimental to the amenity of the area given the existing lawful use, and we therefore recommend it for approval, Chair.
Do members have any questions? I can't see anybody in the... Oh, Councillor Beck.
Can I just ask what's happening to the existing tenants then while all this work's going on? Is it an empty building?
I think the applicant's probably best placed to answer that,
Well,
Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. Mr. Jackson, are you still there? Is he?
Hello?
Mr. Jackson, there's a question in relation to, while this work takes place, what happens to the existing residents there? Could you just explain that position, please?
So it'll be a phased construction. So they'll be able to be rehoused for the period as it's segregated if that makes sense.
Didn't quite actually get that. What did you actually say? Sorry again.
So the construction would be phased, so it'd be over a series of different phases. So the existing tenants would be able to be rehoused as a set amount of one phase is done, and then they'll be able to move back in, and the next phase will be able to be carried out. Okay,
does that satisfy your question? It's going to be phased so that the residents will be able to sort of move into the newer, if you like, dwellings when they're completed. Hang on, Councillor Hanson and then Councillor.
So we've got people living there. They're doing a massive refurb, and people are living, I guess, a wall away. What do we be a wall away? Will it'll be a partition away? How are the residents going to live with that? That's not done overnight. It takes weeks or months to do that kind of conversion. And you've got people still living there through, I'm assuming, wouldn't be a wall, it would be a partition. Where does that fit in within what we're trying to do as a city?
Thanks for that, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Lake, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah. Could I? Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask what is the demographic of the current residents? Are they students? I'm not familiar with the building, but is it a student population, or are they, itinerant workers or local workers, or what's the demographic?
Okay, Mr. Jackson. There has been concerns raised by members of the committee in relation to, obviously, the existing residents. Are they going to be living on what can only be described as a building site? And also, what is the demographic of those residents at the moment? Are they students or some other type of resident? Could you answer those points, please?
Yes. So the existing buildings actually, as a whole, is a main building and an extension. So in the way that it's phased, it's something that we would look at carefully and would liaise with the existing residents in terms of they wouldn't be on a building site as such. It's quite typical when refurbishing existing buildings with residents that are present is that it's done in a way that is well phased, and they will be rehoused, and then they'll be able to then move back in to the newer refurbished sections of the building. Also, in regards to the existing demographics, it is students and young professionals.
Students and young professionals. Okay. Councillor Card.
Yeah, could I just ask, continuing the same line of questioning, it's got a capacity of 36 residents. Are we saying that all 36 stay there, or are we saying that the capacity drops and you refurbish one building, move the remaining residents into another, and then do the other building? Or do all 36 remain in place?
No, you're correct that not all 36 will remain in place. They will, in terms of the phasing, it's something that we would look at more specific. And we house a certain amount of residents, do the certain amount of refurbishment work, and then they would then be able to move back into the refurbished areas.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Councillor Lake.
Sorry, just an obvious one. Where do they go? Where do these residents go?
The client has other properties in which they will be able to rehouse the residents.
Can we just clarify that? Are you saying that some of the residents who currently live there will be rehoused elsewhere while the work is completed, and they would then be able to move back in once it's been completed? And how many are we talking about? If you could just clarify that, please.
Yes, that's correct. In terms of set amount would be rehoused and then be able to move back in once it is all safe and refurbished. In regard to numbers, this is something that we couldn't clarify, as it would be something that we'd have to look at with the contractor and look at it a bit in a lot more detail. I wouldn't like to give a set amount of numbers today, as it was something that we would prefer to look at in much more detail.
Are there any more questions from members? I mean, I think there's a concern from members of the planning committee in relation to, you know, the amenity of the existing residents. And I'm not sure whether we could have some sort of condition applied to this particular application so that we can make sure that those residents who are living there currently are protected. Is there a condition, or is there some way that we can, if you like, impose a condition so that, you know, their amenity is protected? I'll just bring the case officer in first, and I'll bring Councillor Hand.
To impose a condition, Chair, it's got to pass the lawful test and be reasonable and enforceable. Such a condition wouldn't be. Ultimately, with the refurb of any building, it's a matter between the landlord and his tenants as to how that happens. And the applicant or the agent has advised that the owner of the property has other premises elsewhere that he will relocate his tenants to. I think that's something you've got to take at face value, because we can't put a condition on requiring that. As I say, we're looking to grant planning permission for the use and the alterations. How that is actually manifested in terms of it's constructed is really a matter for the landlord, which we can't control. Thanks,
Stuart. Councillor.
The applicant has just said that he's happy to come back with a plan. So to satisfy the concerns that quite obvious, certainly to me, in relation to those people who live there. So is it within our gift to say to defer this until the applicant comes back with a working plan that satisfies our concerns or satisfies our issue? I mean, I can just imagine those people living there over a 12, 18 months conversion, living in absolute hell for that length of time. So I'll take your advice on that, Chair.
Okay, obviously, I think I can see by members of the committee that there is a great deal of concern about the existing residents, and with the comments from the applicants in relation to a more detailed plan, I think it might be appropriate for us to defer this application and invite the applicant to submit the detailed plan, and we'll consider it again at a future planning committee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Jackson, did you want to say something?
Hi, yes, sorry, I didn't get the last comment as the internet went down. I missed the last comment, sorry.
Can I just explain that members of the committee have raised a number of concerns about the existing residents and the building work that's going to take place. You've advised the committee that a number of residents will be moved out to other premises that the owner has elsewhere, but you can't really give us any details of how that's going to work. And we are concerned about the future, the amenity of those existing residents. So we're minded to defer this application for you to provide a more detailed plan of exactly what's going to happen on this particular site to the existing residents. Are you understanding that? Yes?
Is this a planning concern in regards to the planning officer's report?
I don't know whether Stuart.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said before, how any scheme is implemented is ultimately down to the landlord and his tenants to arrange. With smaller HIMOs, for example, what tends to happen is that they will vacate the whole building and it will lay vacant until it's been refurbed. In this particular case, the applicant is choosing to do it a different way, which is up to him. It's not something that we can legitimately put a planning condition on, saying that the building should be vacated or.
Understand that. Is it within the gift of this committee to defer this application for a further report?
In my opinion, Chair, the report that would come back would not be material. if he gave you a plan, it still wouldn't change the fact that we couldn't condition any plan, put it like that, because it wouldn't be enforceable or reasonable to that effect. So you can defer it. You're fully entitled to defer it and ask for the plan if you want some comfort from the applicant about potential relocation of the tenants. But it wouldn't change our report in terms of recommending approval on the basis of how it currently sits before you.
I mean, I understand that. I think that, we all understand that, the recommendation from the officers is to approve this recommendation, just that members of the committee have got a concern about the existing residents, and I'm going to move that the application be deferred for a further report, if that's agreed.
Thank you. I think I'll conduct a vote on this. Just to recap in terms of the points raised by the case officer, because I think this is quite important. The Chair's reference deferred the item for a further report. Fundamentally, the same report will be brought back before committee. The matters for which the deferral is being sought are outside of the planning process in terms of the implementation and phasing. These are wholly without the planning process. It's not unreasonable for members to ask for additional information in terms of phasing, and specifically the reason for that is the residential meaning of existing occupiers. However, any additional conditions as members may seek will not be enforceable and will not satisfy the test, so this will purely be a deferral to enable the applicant to provide some assurance as to future residential amenity during the works. But beyond that, this is outside of the planning process, and therefore the case officer report will remain as put before the committee today. With that in mind, are members satisfied in sequence to defer the application? So, Chair, vote.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lake?
4.
And Councillor Key?
4.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the vote on the application. For the benefit of the applicant's representative and purposes of clarity, the case officer report, when it is returned to committee on a provision of additional information, will remain unchanged. However, can we request that your applicants address the concerns raised by the committee in terms of residents, but for purposes of clarity, at this stage, no additional conditions will be capable of being added for this particular issue, as they will not satisfy the statutory tests. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. I think that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Can I just thank everybody for their attendance and their contributions. I do understand that we do have another planning committee, you'll be glad to know, before Christmas, so we'll see you again here, I think on the 21st of December, is that right, Mike? Okay, so enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll close the meeting. Thank you.